Cipa, Coppa, and Ferpa. These three acronyms represent legislations that are intended to keep students safe as they use the internet. What I'm about to share with you is not intended to discourage you from using technology resources in the classroom, nor is it about adding work to your workload. Rather, this is about keeping your kids safe as they use internet resources and protecting you in case any allegations come against you in the event that something goes horribly wrong. The fact is that the internet has completely changed the way that we think about education. It's changed the way that students engage with each other and engage with the content. New doors are opened all the time, and continually new channels and Web 2.0 tools are created that allow students more power in their projects and designs. However, the dangers of using the internet are real. So for example, 54% of teens have admitted that they chat with strangers online. 30% of teens have admitted to talking about meeting with strangers in person. So the question is, whose responsibility is it to keep students safe as they use these internet tools? The Children's Internet Protection Act, or Cipa, protects students from online predation, cyberbullying, and inappropriate content, including obscene images and child pornography. According to Cipa, there is a federal mandate for filters to be used in all school districts, just like there is here in Newton-Conover City Schools. The filter is applied to different levels at different stages in the academic structure. So, for example, elementary schools might have stricter filters than the high school would have. However, all content must be monitored that the students are using. And according to the school board policy, any picture, image, or graphic or image file or other visual depiction that taken as a whole with respect to minors appeals to a prurient interest in nudity, sex, or excretion, depicts, describes, or represents in any partially patently offensive way with respect to what is suitable for minors, an actual or simulated sexual act or sexual contact, actual or simulated normal or perverted sexual acts, or a lewd exhibition of the genitals, and, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value as to minors. These things are defined by our school board as being forbidden from using in the classroom. However, how do you know that your students are doing the assignments that you would have them do? Our school district has a bring your own device policy, which means that students can bring smartphones into the classroom. But monitoring smartphone use can be a very difficult thing. While these tools can be powerful, they can also be used for inappropriate purposes. So for example, I ask you, can you spot the difference? One of these students is studying for tomorrow's big test, and the other is forwarding naked pictures of a minor to a friend. While students do send inappropriate pictures to each other all the time, this is a federal offense. It's considered child pornography, and there could be a lot of consequences for this happening inside the classroom. So what can you do to protect yourself? Monitoring your students at all times as they use technology in the classroom is, of course, the biggest key to ensure that they are on task and keeping with what they need to do. However, also structuring lessons to make them engaging and using teaching techniques that allow students to engage with the content and not to remain off task will also help in preventing these things from happening. The second legislation that we're going to discuss is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, also known as Coppa. This one mostly applies to students under the age of 13. And the big thing is that students cannot submit personal information about themselves through internet services without verifiable parental consent. Parental consent must be given for all communication that happens online with students, at least that as pertains to personal identification. This includes identity, pictures, grades, all of that business. Okay? You must provide direct notice to parents and obtain verifiable consent before collecting personal info online from students under 13. You must not disclose such information to third parties. The website or tool specifically requested, however, is acceptable. You should make parents aware of their rights to revoke access to and use of their children's information at any time. You should delete personal information once the purpose of its collection has been served. Fortunately, to maintain guidelines for all this, our district has an acceptable use policy and guidelines for acceptable websites and apps for students to use under the age of 13. Just begun this year, this project, led by the fine folks at Central Office, is to aggregate all of the web tools that teachers use in their everyday instruction. And so these These tools are investigated, the end-user license agreements, to see whether students under the age of 13 require parental consent to use them, and are therefore given an approval decision based on how easily or how well they should be used with students under the age of 13. They also provide reasons for this decision, so any of these things can be overridden assuming that parents are informed and have signed a consent form. This list is updated regularly and new things can be added to this list. The last acronym is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. This one is all about keeping student data safe. While we normally think about FERPA as it applies to concrete materials like papers or grades or progress reports or things like that, and not leaving things out on the desk overnight or leaving student data displayed, this also applies to web resources. One of the big places where this can come into play is logging out of PowerSchool and Homebase as soon as you're done with it. If you leave PowerSchool open on your computer, it can be easy for someone to come in and see students' grades or other personal information who does not have access to those things or who is not approved for those things. So be sure to log out of PowerSchool anytime you use it. Also, avoid doing grades on the computer in public places. You never know who's looking over your shoulder, and on public Wi-Fi networks, it's incredibly easy to be able to access what's going on your computer. Nothing is secure on a public Wi-Fi network. Lastly, it's also important to delete records when finished. So whenever you're finished with something, like say collecting student grades on projects using a Google spreadsheet, it's important to first of all make sure that that spreadsheet is secure and cannot be found through internet searches, but also important that that's deleted as soon as that student record is complete, and don't hang on to it longer than is necessary. So what does this mean for you? How should you keep yourself safe? Well, the 4 big keys here are to keep parents informed, first and foremost. Make sure that parents know exactly what resources are going to be used in your classroom, and usually this is well done with a syllabus or something like that at the beginning of the school year. But it's understandable too if you want to try something new or change something. Always check that NCCS approval list to make sure that that whatever app or resources you want to use is approved for your student group, and if it's not, to receive parental consent for those things. Perhaps the biggest item on this list is to always supervise students when using the internet at school, even if it's on a student's device. So if they're using their smartphones in your classroom, it's a really, really important issue to be able to keep track of what they're doing and what they're using it for. Because if they are using it for something inappropriate in your classroom, and especially if they share that inappropriate thing with other students, there could be a lot of trouble for both the school and the teacher. Also, make sure all of your students have submitted the acceptable use policy forms. It can be a real pain for students not to have this form submitted, but it's important that students have legally signed off and parents have legally signed off on this form so that if anything were to happen inside the classroom, that we can say that there was a violation of this policy to which the students and parents agreed to abide. So if it were to ever come down to it, and hopefully it never would, but the acceptable use policy forms helps ensure that the school and the teachers are protected. So please don't allow students to use media devices unless they have filled out and submitted that acceptable use policy form. If they have not, please be sure they've done that. Also, double check to make sure they have not had their acceptable use revoked. Sometimes this happens in extreme situations. Lastly, report any violations of the acceptable use policy or NCCS's Internet Safety Protocol. Okay? Be sure that if a student is found in violation of one of the technology acceptable use policies, that you report it right away. Make sure you submit a discipline referral for that student if a discipline referral is appropriate. But the bottom line is to be sure that this is documented so that if it were ever to become a pattern or trend, you can say that you submitted that and nothing will come back on you in that way. So for more information, there are links below this video that you can view, but the big heuristic to understand is that there is no such thing as privacy on the internet. That nothing that students submit or that you record about students on the internet is really, truly 100% safe. And it's always best to be sure that student data is protected and secure at all times, and that students are not accessing anything inappropriate that could lead to problems later on down the line.